Officials of the Saudi government, the plaintiffs' attorneys contend, formed and operated a network inside the United States that provided critical assistance to the first cohorts of 9/11 hijackers to enter the country. Now, according to Al Qaeda operatives that were captured, and according to to Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, who, by the way, before he was captured, himself and Ramzi bin al-Shib gave an interview to Al Jazeera reporter Yosri Fuda, who, along with Nick Fielding, wrote a book, Masterminds of Terror. Now, I've interviewed Nick Fielding, where they talked about Khalid Sheikh Mohammed openly admitting to facilitating and planning the events of 9/11 and having Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf Hazmi originally as the pilots for Flight 77. They failed in that endeavor because they did not go to English classes because they were lazy. And they were replaced late by Hani Hanjour. The 71-page document, by the way, already the Truth Movement's dismissing this story, saying that the hijackers are not essential to the story. And how asinine is this? Imagine saying that the criminals, or part criminals, are non-essential to a story that is based on terrorist acts by who? If they're non-essential, then the entire 9/11 endeavor is not essential. Now, what you want to believe that the towers came down by controlled demolition, well, that would mean they had pre-knowledge. If you're going to know that these hijackers are involved in a operation using planes and crashing them specifically, and what type of intelligence would that embark on? Signals intelligence. Those who are on the ground, either listening to the phone calls, as I've always told you, coming from the NSA, listening to bin Laden's satellite phones, listening to the house in Yemen. If they know about these people's arrival coming to the United States, that means they can manipulate the operation in order for these people to come here successfully and not arrested by the FBI. Hey, by the way, the CIA never told the FBI or the State Department about Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf Hazmi's arrival in the United States. This is outside of the Saudis and Israelis operatives who are on the ground living next to these people and providing assistance. So if you know about an operation before it takes place, sure, you can have people wire up the World Trade Center. But don't tell anybody or myself that the hijackers are non-essential. I think that's an asinine statement to make. Nothing about 9/11 is non-essential. For you building worshipers out there, that includes you too. 9/11 is not about ground zero. It's about the Pentagon in Shanksville. It's about the Patriot Act. It's about the National Defense Authorization Act. It's about warrantless wiretapping. It's about the invasion of Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Libya, the destabilization of the Middle East, providing extraordinary powers to the intelligence services. And I could go on. A 71-page document released in redacted form earlier this month summarizes what the plaintiffs say they've learned through the evidence obtained in discovery and recently declassified materials. The alleged Saudi officials, most notably Fahad al-Tamari, an imam at the King Fahd Mosque, and an accredited diplomat at Saudi Arabia's consulate in the city, Omar al-Bayoumi, who masqueraded as a graduate student but was identified by the FBI as an intelligence operative through Operation Encore. Later, and the media covered Operation Encore. I'll give them that much. CBS, ABC was given some coverage, but forgotten about over time. Short enough time, too. When the Canestraro document came out, and we're talking about classified material, friends, that finally put the nail in the coffin for the CIA anyway, and Saudi intelligence, nobody covered. In fact, very few. I've interviewed one, Seth Tatina, yesterday. Gray Zone did. Florida Bulldog did. Nobody else. Yes, I posted a story to it, but the prominent platforms, they deserve credit. CBS, ABC, CNN, where are you? You supposed fifth column. Where's the people's voice? You were ragging on each other like a bunch of gossipy girls on TikTok. But rather the front end of a conspiracy that included the Saudi embassy in Washington and senior government officials in Riyadh. The plaintiffs argue that Fahad al-Tamari and Omar al-Bayoumi organized safe reception, transportation, and housing for hijackers Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi, beginning upon their arrival in California on January 15, 2000. Both Tamari and al-Bayoumi have denied aiding the plot. Bayoumi, along with Saudi Arabia, has also denied that he had any involvement with its intelligence operations. Meanwhile, this guy is walking around with a camera, and according to the counter document, the CIA had an open file on him for the past 15, 17 years. Yeah. Just imagine some guy, California, is going to have the FBI and CIA have an open file on for no reason. The filing further argues that Fahad al-Tamari and Omar al-Bayoumi introduced a pair to local sympathizers in Los Angeles and San Diego who catered to their day-to-day needs. People like Osama Bastan and Anwar al-Awlaki, who was an imam at the Virginia Falls Mosque, including help with immigration matters, digital and phone communications, and receiving funds from al-Qaeda by wire transfer. And by the way, the wire transfers came from Mustafa al-Hawsawi, according to the government's alleged findings, who, by the way, was tortured brutally. And even if he is guilty, we have to basically take that with a grain of salt, thanks to the CIA's SEER program, which basically was signed off by the Secretary of Defense, Donald Rumsfeld. And hopefully he's in a hell that the Christians make believe is existing, because he led to many, many thousands of Muslims become needlessly brutalized at the hands of their captors and the CIA for no reason. By the way, there is one detainee in Guantanamo, Abu Zubaydah, who the CIA claimed was an al-Qaeda ranking figure. In fact, number 3. They find out in 2006 through the military tribunal's hearing that Abu Zubaydah was not even al-Qaeda fighter, much less number 3. But yet he's still in Guantanamo without charge, and he is what they call a forever detainee, thanks to White House legal counsel John Yoo, David Attenborough, who actually wrote the legislation absolving foreign detainees to have protections under the Geneva Conventions, signed off by the Bush White House. And if you think that just pertains to foreign detainees, soon it will be detainees. Maybe we saw that sometime, I think January 6th. Both Saudi nationals with little education of command of English, whose experience abroad consisted mostly of training and fighting for jihadist causes. To procure a car as well as driver's licenses, the support network was crucial. And imagine saying that none of this is important. I mean, I really can't get over that. You people in the troop would need to realize that the planes were hijacked. I'm sorry for you no-planers and living hijackers. Embarrassing at this point. You know, if you're going to get anywhere, you're going to have to admit that, hey, my beliefs are wrong. God. Imagine saying that to the law firms of these, you know, they'll just look at you like you're a fucking retard. And then you claim you're for the victims' families. Like, yeah, please. Finally responded to the Saudi motion to dismiss the case, which is, I thought the Saudis wanted the evidence to be shown. Isn't that what Prince Jaber basically said? Saudi Minister of Foreign Affairs? Didn't he say, we encourage the government to release documents? Now, what happened? The filing responded to the Saudi motion to dismiss the case, which is currently before the U.S. District Court, the Southern District of New York, under George Daniels, by the way, who makes extensive references to the FBI investigative reports, memos, and communication records and contemporaneous evidence materials that are still under seal but are likely to make public in the coming weeks. One of us, Steve Simon, had been a plaintiff's expert in the case and listed to review and provide an independent assessment of the evidence. Some of the claims in the filing appears to be corroborated by a document prepared by the FBI in July 2021 and entitled Connections to the Attacks of September 11, 2001. as well as other documents declassified under President Biden's Executive Order 14040, which is Operation Encore. The materials produced thus far in a case deal mainly with Saudi support provided to these two California-based al-Qaeda operatives and their fellow hijackers of American Airlines Flight 77, which some truthers basically say never existed and didn't crash into the Pentagon, thereby absolving Saudi intelligence and the CIA. Thank you. The State Department and the intelligence services don't need to infiltrate your truth movement. You're doing it for them. Well done. Which was crashed into the Pentagon. Assuming that the case, now 7 years old, goes forward, the presiding judge could order a further broader discovery phase, probing possible Saudi support for the other hijackers, most of whom came to the East Coast beginning in mid-2000. Imagine being a no-planer in this day and age. I mean, embarrassing. The materials that have already surfaced, however, document the extent of the complicity of Saudi officials. The 9/11 Commission report recounted numerous contacts between Omar al-Bayoumi and Fahad al-Tamimi, but described only circumstantial evidence of Fahad al-Tamimi as a contact for the two hijackers and stated that it didn't know whether Bayoumi's first encounter with the operatives occurred by chance or design. But the evidence assembled in the ongoing lawsuit suggests that the actions of Fahad al-Tamimi and Omar al-Bayoumi took to support the hijackers were actually deliberate, sustained, and carefully coordinated with other Saudi officials. In addition to the documents showing financial and logistical support, the evidence includes several wiretaps seized by the United Kingdom during raids of Omar al-Bayoum's properties there when he was arrested in Birmingham in September of 2001. One video, a more complete version of a tape review by the 9/11 Commission, shows Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi at a welcoming party by Omar al-Bayoumi after they moved to San Diego. By the way, this part was not included in the final report. As I always said, the Truth Movement claims it's a false report, and therefore you don't need to read it, which is asinine in its own face. How can you criticize a report if you never read it? I have read it, and it's an incomplete one. It's not a false report. There is a narrative, but it's not complete. That's why it's an incomplete report. Full video of the filing claims show that the party was organized by Omar al-Bayoumi and Fahad al-Tamimi to introduce the hijackers to a carefully curated group of like-minded community members and religious leaders. The UK police also found, according to the filing, a notepad in which Omar al-Bayoumi had sketched a drawing of a plane alongside a calculation used to discern the distance at which a target on the ground will be visible from a certain altitude. Another seized video contains footage of Omar al-Bayoumi in Washington, D.C., where he met with Saudi religious officials posted as diplomats at the embassy and visited the U.S. Capitol. By the way, who else is in Washington, D.C.? Muassad al-Jarrah, the head of the Religious Affairs Committee in Washington, D.C. In the video, according to the filing, Omar al-Bayoumi carefully films and notes the Capitol's structural features, entrances, and security posts. By the way, it is alleged, according to Khalid according to Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and Ramzi bin al-Shib, that the Capitol was the destination for Flight 93. And later on, it was alleged by the U.S. government that it was either the Capitol or the White House. Addressing his narration to the esteemed brothers, the Capitol was the likely fourth target of the 9/11 attacks. The one that was spared when passengers aboard Flight 93 wrestled with the hijackers in a plane crash near Shanksville, Pennsylvania. If Fahad al-Tamimi and Omar al-Bayoumi was the front end of the support network for the hijackers, their control officers in the United States would have been in Washington at the Saudi embassy. In the pre-9/11 years, Saudi Arabia's Ministry of Islamic Affairs had a sizable presence in the embassy as well as a consulate in Los Angeles. The ministry's representatives also saw the many Saudi imams like Fahad al-Tamimi in Saudi-supported mosques in the United States and posted Saudi propagators to Muslim communities in the United States because Saudi Arabia was propagating what? Wahhabi Islam. The hijackers were known as Wahhabi adherents. By the way, Wahhabi is not Islamic. It is created by a nomad who helped to create the Emirate of Diriyah through King Saud, who later created the first Saudi state. That was the first Saudi state, which later captured the cities of Hijaz and Najd and later formed Saudi Arabia. The ideology of Wahhabism has not been eliminated. According to Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince, he reformed Saudi Arabia. Well, you can't reform a country based on the essence of the country. You do have clerics that are not vocal anymore because you arrested a lot of them, got rid of the religious police only from pressure of the West after the 9/11 attacks. And because you wanted to fill your pockets, what did you do, Mohammed bin Salman? You arrested all of your opponents, including the rights to the real king, the Al-Turki family, and you arrested them and appointed yourself as crown prince and your father, bin Salman, as the king, who is now deposed because he's basically inept. You're running the country, but you're also a murderer and a corrupt official. Your days will be numbered soon. And then the rise of the Wahhabis will come back, and Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan will be more powerful than ever because the Biden administration made sure that billions of dollars of weapons go to the Taliban, who actually hired Al-Qaeda to become part of the government. Because the United States didn't want to eliminate an enemy we'll use later. This is how you manage to repeat world history every 10 to 15 years. I mean, right now we're going through the Cold War again, aren't we? Russia, China, Iran. And after 10 years of this, what will happen? Well, Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan will be a powerhouse. And the Wahhabis will get rid of bin Salman, either by murdering him or by taking control of the country because of his corruption. The Islamic Affairs officers and personnel appear to operate according to different procedures and the other units within the embassy. And the support network for the hijackers had powerful backing in the Saudi capital. The FBI found evidence that when the Saudi Consul General in Los Angeles sought to fire a member of the support network who had been storing jihadist literature at the consulate, Fahad al-Tamari was able to use his influence to save his job. As the new filing also documents, there was extensive phone traffic between Fahad al-Tamari, Omar al-Biyumi, and the embassy during critical moments when the hijackers needed and received support. The plaintiff's claims are contested by lawyers representing Saudi Arabia on a range of technical, jurisdictional, and factual grounds. They denied that Saudi officials directed support to the hijackers or were otherwise complicit in the attacks. Fahad al-Tamari did not assist the hijackers at all, the lawyers have said, and his alleged actions would have not fallen within the scope of the official responsibilities. This is actually false, because according to the FBI's Operation Encore, and I have read this document, where there was an informant who actually reported to the FBI that he heard a phone call between a person in Malaysia, who we think is Fahad Taufik bin Atash, also known as Khalad, speaking to Fahad al-Tamari in Los Angeles about the arrival of two brothers. Not literal brothers, not blood brothers, but actual brothers of Islam in Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi. Well, what happened? Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi were in Malaysia, which was at a high-level summit meeting hosted by Yazid Sufat, an Indonesian businessman with ties to Jemaah Islamiyah, an Islamist organization that is allied to Al-Qaeda. And then from there, the CIA and the NSA tracked al-Mihdhar and al-Hazmi from their home in Yemen to this meeting in Malaysia, and they entered the United States. But the CIA, under Cofer Black and Richard Blee, lied to the State Department's principals meeting, saying that they lost track, but they never did. In fact, they were running an illegal operation with Saudi intelligence. But if you don't believe in hijackers, you have none of this to blame. Thank you, Truth Movement. Bayumi's assistance was minimal and unrelated to terrorist activity, the lawyers argued. Neither he nor the Fahad al-Tamari belonged to a jihadist network. Some of the disputes are less about facts than about interpretation. The Capitol video in the Saudi view is nothing more than a typical home movie by an enthusiastic tourist. Of course, who just so happened to meet Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi in a very small, dinky restaurant called the Mediterranean Cafe, in which Fahad al-Tamari knew about and told his parishioners about the restaurant, who then told Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi about this restaurant. Omar al-Biyumi, on the day that they met Al-Midar al-Hazmi was with an associate, Kaysan Bindan. And according to Kaysan Bindan's interview with the FBI, they were already in the restaurant. And in came and they were, Al-Midar and al-Hazmi were already in the restaurant, and Omar al-Bayoumi and Kaysan Bindan joined them. According to Omar al-Bayoumi, they were already in the restaurant and then walked in Al-Midar and al-Hazmi. I believe Kaysan Bindan because Bayoumi is a liar. If the court denies the Saudi motion to dismiss in the coming months, we will know whose view of the evidence had been more persuasive. After 9/11, President Bush and his team argued that a non-state actor like al-Qaeda could not have pulled off the attacks alone, that some country must have been behind it all. The state, they insisted, was Iraq. The United States invaded Iraq. In a savage irony, they have been right. They have been right. They may have been right about state support, but flat wrong about the state. Should we now invade Saudi Arabia? That's right. That's the country we should have invaded. They're the ones who created the Wahhabi creed, which led to the creation of the Islamic State in the Levant, Al-Qaeda, Abu Sayyaf, Jamaat Islamiyah, Egyptian Islamic Jihad, Gamma Islamiyah, Boko Haram, As-Sahab. All these groups are basically in existence still with Saudi money from the 1970s through the oil boom helped to create these fanatics. The answer is no. The Saudi Arabia of 2001 no longer exists. The country is still capable of criminal action. Witness the case of the journalist Jamal Khashoggi, victim in 2018 of a team of Saudi murderers in Istanbul. But the Islamic extremism that had coursed through the central institutions of Saudi state appears to have been largely exorcised. No, they're not exorcised. They're just in the shadows, waiting, much like what Egypt did in the 1960s and 70s under Gamal Nasser through Arab nationalism, which was the permeate ideology, which created these repressive dictators who actually enjoyed a Western lifestyle and through trade with Russia and China began to monopolize their countries. And then when they arrested people within the Muslim Brotherhood and executed a top Muslim Brotherhood official in Sayyid Qutb, what did they do? Well, the Islamists waited, and then they waited, and they grew while in these prisons. And then Anwar Sadat became the president of Egypt and released the jails. And what happened to him? He was killed by the very Islamists he let go. So, the country of Saudi Arabia does not exist without the Wahhabi creed. The kingdom itself is very arrogant, you see, made up of princes and sympathizers within their own family. You think they're just disappeared? Well, maybe they're waiting because Crown Prince bin Salman is greedy. And his greed will make other families. And there are 7 family lines in the Saudi kingdom, and they are called the Sudari 7. These are the 7 sons of the original founder, Ibn Saud, in which some of these families are going to remember what Prince Salman did when he captured power illegally and made himself the crown prince, king, really, because his father is mentally inept through a stroke. Do you think the Wahhabists, the Islamists, are basically disappeared? They're in the shadows. And right now, yes, they're being repressed, but they're not going to go anywhere. And as long as you destroy these countries, which the United States and Israel could do, Israel through the Palestinians, you think the Palestinians are just simply going to forget what happened here? You think the Qassam brigades or Hamas or Hezbollah or the Palestinian Islamic Jihad are going to forget what the Israeli Zionists did? Do you think the Islamists in Libya, in Syria, in Afghanistan, in Iraq are going to forget what the United States did? And in Africa, and by the way, Africa, hardly anyone mentions. More props to Dave DeCamp and Connor Freeman for reporting on Africa. They're the only ones. Libertarian Institute, I always told you to subscribe to them, the best in the country when it comes to geopolitics, and not the fifth column. They're going to come back in 10 years. Mark my words. It has happened before, it'll happen again, because The one thing is for certain, when it comes to foreign policy and foreign policy analysts, they look at the world 20, 30 years down the road. Why do you think Biden left those weapons there in Afghanistan? Was it because he was basically couldn't basically carry them with him? He knew what was taking over the country. They know. They get daily threat matrix reports from the Department of Defense. They know. Is it ignorance? Sure, could be. Biden probably doesn't realize the threat of the Taliban. Could be. Trump certainly did, and he didn't give a shit. To understand why a little history is necessary, at the time Al-Qaeda emerged a full-fledged terrorist organization in the 1990s, the country's religious establishment wielded tremendous power, controlling the judiciary, the Ministry of Islamic Affairs, and an array of large institutions such as the Al-Haramain Foundation, the Muslim World League, and the World Assembly of Muslim Youth, as well as other funded NGOs, non-governmental organizations. The power of the religious establishment was rooted in the compact at the heart of the Saudi state. The legitimacy of the ruling family had been bound up with the Wahhabi clergy since Muhammad ibn Saud, the patriarch of the royal family, and the religious reformer Muhammad ibn Abd al-Wahhab joined in an alliance of 1744 that would conquer the Arabian Peninsula. That's what I was talking about, the Emirate of Diriyah, which later was renamed to Saudi Arabia. The organizations and other religious charities were established for the purpose of dawah, or spreading the faith. The Wahhabi clerical establishment had strict notions of how Saudi society should be regulated and believed that it would be best for Muslims worldwide to subject to Wahhabi rules. But they were not predisposed to declare war to propagate Wahhabism. The pact the Wahhabi clerics formed relegated matters of statecraft to the House of Saud. It was a system that worked until it didn't. Change came because of the counterinsurgency of the Egyptian government waged against the radical Islamists who had assassinated President Anwar Sadat in 1981, like I said before. That campaign has augmented an existing effort to suppress the Muslim Brotherhood, which continues today. Many who escaped the wrath of the Egyptian government fled to Saudi Arabia, flooding into the religious universities and teaching positions or obtaining jobs in the religious bureaucracy. The result was a new ideological framework that meshed Wahhabi doctrine together with Muslim Brotherhood activism. The hunger for jihad among Saudis was stoked by the thrilling stories of the war in Afghanistan against the Soviets, told by fathers and uncles returning from their jihad jollies, as Western officials referred to these expeditions, which mostly took place far behind the front lines of the conflict. As a concession to the clergy's demands and the realities of the new environment, the monarchy authorized the creation of religious affairs ministry. But the youthful radicals soon had access to both the ministry's gigantic budget, which mixed public and private money, to a helter-skelter way, and an apparatus that could deploy ministry personnel abroad under diplomatic cover, including the United States. Thus, from the mid-1990s, the ministry was staffed and run by a growing number of people who shared Osama bin Laden's beliefs, the view that the world was gripped by a cosmic struggle between believers and infidels. In short, they saw the United States as a leader of world infidelity and believed that true Muslims had a duty to fight the infidels. Contemplating those beliefs was the distinctive additional bit of jihadist dogma, of which bin Laden became the greatest proponent. Holding that restoring the realm of Islam to its historic greatness required striking the United States on its own territory. Only through violence could the U.S. be forced to end its support for the apostate regimes that plagued the Muslim world. And only once the props were kicked out from under those regimes, Egypt, Syria, and Iraq, could truly Islamic governments take charge. That was the idea behind 9/11 and the campaign that was supposed to follow. The United States in the 1990s and after were aware of some activities of the Saudi religious establishment, especially in Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Bosnia, where fighters, including the future hijackers Khalid al-Mihdhar and Al-Hazmi, to name just two, were supported through Saudi charities. The picture became more ominous as the decade progressed, as such charities, including Al-Haramain, were implicated in East Africa's embassy bombings, which killed 224 people, injured nearly 5,000, and destroyed 2 U.S. embassy posts in Nairobi and Dar es Salaam. As staff members working on counterterrorism on the National Security Council staff, we watched a succession of our colleagues from the White House and State Department visit Riyadh to ask for better policing of these charities. Routinely, they came back with nothing to show for their efforts, while other weighty issues on the U.S.-Saudi bilateral agenda, containing Iran achieving Middle East peace, lowering energy prices, ensured that Riyadh never felt any serious pressure. Why wasn't there much more of a response from the monarchy won't be fully understood until the royal archives are opened, assuming that internal discussions were even recorded. But it does seem in general that the House of Saud ruled, but did not govern. Governance was typically for commoners. Without inquiring closely into the day-to-day operations of religious and foreign affairs ministries, the royals could not have had a clear idea of what was being done in their name, including the deployment of Saudis with diplomatic visas for the purpose of attacking the kingdom's strongest, most reliable transactional partner. But by the way, that's how you begin compartmentalization, a need to know on a need to know. The same effort being that Bush, being the president, being that he's a half a moron. Would you want Bush to know the intricate details of 9/11 before it happens? No. All Bush needs to know is that there is a threat coming from bin Laden, a threat to airlines, but he doesn't know when, how, and why. That's all he needs to know. The CIA, maybe they have specifics. I don't know. I don't have classified material, and I'm not going to assume for the sake of assuming because I hate the CIA, in which I do. But they intentionally withheld information from the FBI regarding these two men, Khalid Ahmed and Wahbi, for a reason, because they were illegally operating in the United States with Saudi intelligence on these two men, collecting information. What are they doing here? But if you're going to go as far as say CIA wanted 9/11, I can't go there. I won't do it. As evil in an organization as the CIA is, I still won't blame them because I don't have evidence, and neither do you. Nobody here has it. And the worst thing you could do is assume. Speculation is not a form of evidence, as I've always told you. So don't blame Israel for 9/11. Don't blame the CIA for 9/11 unless you have material showing it. You hate Israel for what they're doing to the Palestinians? Yes, I join you. But I'm also not going to say that they planned and orchestrate 9/11, which is asinine on its face. Did they have foreknowledge? I can make an argument that they did. But that's me. And unless you have the information or, accept, which are the out student ring, because some of you actually believe they're in the World Trade Center. But no, they're on the ground. It's a bigger operation. Stop listening to Rebecca Roth. Just stop it. Stop listening to Christopher Bolin. They don't know what they're talking about. They're not experts. They're some of the dumbest, the most ignorant regarding 9/11. The truth movement needs to get this right, or you're just going to stay where you're staying at now, which is on the internet. Posting stickers in bathroom stalls. Astonishingly, the attacks of 9/11 had little effect on the Saudi approach to religious extremism, as diplomats and intelligence officials have attested. What finally changed royal minds was the experience of suffering an attack on Saudi soil. In May 2003, gunmen and suicide bombers struck 3 residential compounds in Riyadh, killing 39 people. The authorities attributed the attacks to al-Qaeda in cooperation with the U.S. and proved quickly and dramatically. Mohammed bin Nayef, the bin Nayef family, I said al-Turki, but it's the Nayef family that are supposed to be the kings of Saudi Arabia. And what did Crown Prince bin Salman do? He arrested them. It was a coup. And the United States knew it was a coup, but still managed to deal with this corrupt regime. But in order for that to work, the United States will basically ignore the coup. But you're going to have to repress the religious extremism in your country. And he did. He most certainly did. Got rid of the religious police. Women can drive. But let's be honest, bin Salman doesn't care about whether women can drive or have rights. He cares to appease his masters. And he knows the United States are his masters. And that's why Saudi Arabia has a tentative relationship with Israel. Can you imagine a country whose ideology basically is at war with Israel, is allied with Israel, because Wahhabism and Zionism are evil entities led by maniacs. Benjamin Netanyahu, who I hope gets arrested by the international criminal courts. But the same goes to Crown Prince bin Salman. Hopefully one day he gets arrested by the criminal courts. Mohammed bin Nayef, one of the sons of the country's most powerful princes and the interior minister, emerged as the national counterterrorism chief and later interior minister. Mohammed bin MBN, as he's known, transformed Saudi intelligence into America's most valuable foreign partner in the fight against terrorism, providing tips that led to later plots being thwarted. MBN himself became a friend to a succession of CIA directors. When King Abdullah died in 2015, his half-brother Salman bin Abdulaziz succeeded him, and MBN was made crown prince. 2 years later, however, Salman removed MBN, stripped him of his ministry and other offices, and installed his own son, Mohammed bin Salman, who was soon detained and subjected to exercisable conditions and disappeared from public view. A coup. Mohammed bin Salman, widely known as MBS, now the country's de facto ruler, may have seen MBN as a rival, but he certainly shared his opposition to extremism. During his time in power, the influence of the Wahhabi establishment appears to have been drastically curtailed. The country's notorious religious police have largely disappeared from sight, and the Ministry of Islamic Affairs has been reformed along with the massive Islamic organizations. In 2018, Mohammed bin Aqim Al Isa, the new head of the Muslim World League, visited the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum, a development that for his predecessors would have been utterly unthinkable. There will be plenty of tension and recriminations if this exhibits in the New York case become public and the case progresses. Should the plaintiffs overcome the Saudi motion to dismiss, an extended period of merits, discovery, and a potential trial on liability for 9/11 will exasperate matters. But many years after the attacks, it seems likely that judicial determination, not military action, is the most viable means of which to close the books on 9/11. Revelations from the legal case are also likely to set up another round of self-flagellation over the failures of America's law enforcement and intelligence agencies. The 9/11 Commission report and other accounts, including our own, showed the FBI to be shamefully asleep at the switch before the attacks. By the way, the FBI took a lot of sword here, meaning that they fell on it. The NSA escaped prosecution. The CIA basically got yelled at, but the FBI got the blame. Meanwhile, what the report didn't mention, what the Joint House inquiry did mention a little bit, but neglected to go further, was that the NSA had been monitoring bin Laden's satellite phones since the early 1990s. From there, a number kept calling it, and he kept calling it. And this number was red flagged. And it was soon to be known that it came from a house in Yemen owned by an individual named Ahmed al-Hada. Ahmed al-Hada was an associate of bin Laden through the Soviet-Afghan War. From there, this house was tasked to be an al-Qaeda communications hub in which al-Qaeda members in repressive countries such as Egypt and Syria could pass messages along to Ahmed al-Hada and pass the messages to high-ranking al-Qaeda officials. The NSA and the CIA became aware of this house, which basically learned of the two men, Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi, and then followed these men to a high-level summit meeting, who then followed them inside the United States. And by the way, the FBI had no idea about their arrival because the CIA, the NSA, and Saudi intelligence neglected to mention this. Meanwhile, Israeli intelligence, probably at their own individual behest, working outside of the CIA, probably, began their own operations, which mimicked what was going on in the West between the CIA and Saudi Arabia. But this foreign intelligence ring was much bigger. And not only were they spying on the United States through the FBI and the DEA, but they were living in close proximity to the hijackers. Did the CIA tell the Israelis about these men? Or did the Israelis know about these men through an informant of their own? I'm working on a theory that Ziad Jarrah was indeed that Israeli mole up until the day of the attacks. But that's the theory. Please don't take it literally. I have no evidence for this. How could the Bureau have been so ignorant of what the staff of a foreign embassy was doing under its nose? Because of the simple fact that they were not told. Counterintelligence, after all, is the same bureaucracy responsibility. And the FBI's conduct on this case is inexplicable. Curiously, agents continued investigating until at least 2021, and to judge by the 2021 document, knew about the Saudis' indispensable support for the hijackers. But their work was shut down by the Justice Department. There will be lots of questions to answer. And now it's up to Judge George Daniels in the Southern District of New York whether or not to take the evidence by the FBI's Operation Encore and to go forward with it. There will be pressure from the Saudi government through the State Department to repress this trial. But don't be surprised if the victim's family's blood does not count for anything, because look at what the United States are basically supporting: the blood of the Palestinians through their own weapons. And if you think that the Biden administration is progressive enough to basically allow for this case to go forward, which would destroy his administration, by the way, he's not winning in November. I will guarantee you that, because the Palestinian issue destroyed any type of comeback for this guy. Even the left basically lost track of him, and there will be a Republican president. And it won't matter, because whoever's president will cater to his allies and to their interests, because money is thicker than blood, and so is oil. The United States government doesn't care about you. And if they don't care about the victims' families of 9/11, what makes you think they care about you or me or anybody else in this country? And if the past 5 years hasn't been evident enough, I don't know what to tell you. All right, guys, thank you for tuning into the video, and we'll see you tomorrow. And whenever there's an update, I'll report it without bias and without prejudice.